the goal of today's webinar is not, hey, here's how to get around it and how to cheat a spam filter. It's really for people and the attendees to understand how a spam filter works, so you can understand how your good email may end up in the spam folder and the spam box. Okay, so on the next slide, email delivery architecture. This is a big, busy slide, but we'll walk through it in pretty good detail here. So from a high level, if I start at the upper left-hand corner and I go through, start with the sender, basically this is showing how you send your email, and for the purposes of being consistent, we'll talk about sending it via an email service provider. The system doesn't really change if you're sending it, or the diagrams don't change really materially if you're sending from your own servers or email servers. They do slightly, but to be consistent, we'll talk about as though this will be focusing on as though you're using an email service provider. Okay, but anyway, upper left, so you're going to create your email, on the email service provider or ESP servers. That'll get sent. It'll get sent across the cloud to the receiving email systems. Initially, it'll be viewed by an email firewall, email filter, spam filter, and that spam filter, where we're going to go into some more detail, then basically the email spam filter makes sort of a left turn, if you will. And if you look at the bottom part of the diagram, that's really one of the big advancements in email filters and spam filters in the last several years, is that now spam filters share information with all of the other systems in their network, as well as other networks and other blacklists and network blacklists. So, this is a big advancement in the last several years, and this is pretty interesting stuff. So that cloud and the stuff down at the bottom, we'll talk about in more detail. We'll talk about how the spam databases are checked, blacklists are checked, DNS entry is checked. There's various feedback where, from individual recipients, they can mark your email as either saying, either clicking as this is spam or this is not spam, and so forth. So all that information is stored and maintained in the cloud, so to speak, and then fed back real time to the spam firewalls. And then after that check is done, assuming you get through, the email will then be sent on to the email server, and then finally it'll go to your local inbox, where it'll get filtered quite often again by another set of local filters, and then it makes it through all of that process, and the email finally ends up in the inbox. So I bet you thought this was simple. You just send it out, but there's quite a bit involved. Okay, so let's talk about the first part on creating and sending an email. Again, in this case, we'll start with using an email service provider or an ESP. Again, it doesn't change materially if you're using your own servers. It's just I'll do this to stay consistent. The term you might hear quite often is MTA. People ask, what's MTA? What does that mean? MTA means mail transfer agent. So that's another name or a techie name for your mail server, typically for your outbound mail server. So you'll see that quite a bit and hear that quite a bit. So the process, of course, you're going to create your email, typically with an external HTML editor or an online editor. You'll either create it in the, in Pinpoint's case, we have a WYSIWYG editor and an HTML editor you can create, or you can import your email. For best results, you can import your HTML code design. For best results, we recommend you create multi-part versions. So we'll get into a little more detail. But what that means is when you send an email, you'll find that there's still between 10 and 15% of recipients have set their preferences to still get text. Now, some of that is because they're on older mobile devices, but more commonly now, mostly for security reasons, or typically for security reasons, you'll still find 10 to 15% of your recipients will set their email preferences to receive only the text version of your email. And so what you want to do, number one, for readability, and number two, for spam reasons, or to avoid spam reasons, is to create a multi-part email. And any email provider allows you to do that. Again, whether using Constant Contact or Responses, whatever, Pinpoint, they all allow you to do that. You'll create what's called a multi-part or MIME version, where you'll have an HTML version of your email, which is what we're familiar with, and then also the text version, which would be displayed when the recipient's email client has an option to text or has the preferences set to text. Okay, run a spam checker. Again, Pinpoint has a feature where you can run through an automatic spam checker and give you feedback and tell you what phrases need to be, fixed or changed or modified, or which ones may get you into trouble. Again, most email service providers have that tool rather. So if you're creating emails, for those of you who are listening, you might be scratching your head. We typically get about 25 to 30% that say, geez, I'm not using an email provider. We just use Outlook, or we use whatever our hosted system is. As a note, you might want to, any of the email providers really have these features. Some of them are included free, and some of them charge additional for it. but these are really, really valuable tools. You'd be surprised. I have a customer that I worked with, or we worked with, it sticks in mind here, where the very first time they ran their spam score on an email that they had been sending for a while out of their own email servers, it had a spam score of, I think, 22, when you really want to keep the score within our system to about a 2 or a 3, so it was off the charts. And it was because they happened to be in the security business, and there were a lot of phrases and so forth they weren't familiar with. So anyway, this one isn't so much about content, but nonetheless, having spammy content or having phrases that are viewed by the spam filter to be spammy, even accidentally or unintentionally, will definitely get you tripped up. So that's an important feature to use. Anyway, also you can preview your email in various email clients. Again, most email service providers, including Pinpoint, have a previewer, so you can preview and see exactly what it's going to look like. And most of us will also include some error messages or warnings that will tell you, hey, here's some HTML code that doesn't render properly. The most challenging, or as one customer said, brain dead. I hope that doesn't offend any Microsoft folks. But anyway, version is Outlook 07. I mean, Outlook 07 and Gmail are sort of the lowest common denominators in terms of the type and the level, the amount of HTML that they, or the various types of various components of HTML that they actually support. So they're the most difficult, if you will, from a design perspective. But anyway, you can preview your email, again, just to kind of check the content. At that point, you're going to then schedule and send away. For those of you in the email service provider range, if you're using any kind of custom fields like dear, first name, or something like that, or embedding any variables, that email merge occurs, and then it's sent from the email service provider's servers. The only way that this differs from you sitting in your Outlook system is that you may create it directly in Outlook. As an example, create the email directly in Outlook, and of course then you just press the send button, and they go out of your servers, where the emails are sent out of your server instead of the email service provider or hosted email server. Okay. Emails received then by, so the first part we've got the, that's how your email is actually sent, or created rather. And then the next, this is just sort of the high level overview. The next level is the email is then received by the recipient's corporate spam filter or networked in the cloud spam filter, all right? And here's what it checks. This is just a high level, and we're going to drill into detail on these various aspects. That receiving spam filter system or spam firewall is going to check a couple things. It's going to check the reputation of the sending email servers, and there's a lot involved in that. It's going to check the sending email server settings to make sure that the settings are accurate and correct. It's going to do authentication. In other words, are you who you say you are, to ensure that you're not spoofing something else or somebody else. It's going to check authorization. Is this email server that I received the email from authorized to send this email for the given domain? And again, we'll go into more detail in each of these. And then finally, the spam filter will still check content and assess a spam score and determine, just based on the content, whether it believes that the actual email is is spam or not. Okay. And if you pass all those tests, then you get to go to the next step. You're still not even anywhere near you're about halfway to the inbox. But at that point, after you've passed all these steps, you then move on to the next step. But any of these items here can trip up your email. Again, even if it's a perfectly legitimate email, there's plenty of items along the line here that can get the email tripped up.